I stood in the oncologist's office, staring at the rain streaking down the window. Stage 3. The words hung in the air like smoke I couldn't breathe through. Doctor. Morrison kept talking, something about treatment options and survival rates, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I was 58 years old, a nurse for 33 years, and I'd seen this conversation from the other side more times than I could count. I never thought I'd be the one sitting in that chair. My phone sat heavy in my purse. 2 calls to make, 2 children who needed to know their mother had cancer. I waited until I got home to my small cottage by the ocean, the one my late husband Tom and I had bought when the kids were little. The waves were rough that December afternoon, crashing against the rocks like they were angry at the world. I understood the feeling. I called my son first. Brian was 32, living in Seattle, working as some kind of regional sales manager for a tech company. He answered on the 5th ring. Mom? Kind of in the middle of something here. Brian, I need to tell you something. I got my test results back today. Oh yeah? Everything okay? I took a breath. It's cancer. Stage 3. Ovarian. There was a pause. Not the kind where someone is processing devastating news. The kind where someone is deciding what to say. Jesus, Mom, that's... Wow. Okay. Listen, I'm actually in a meeting right now. Can I call you back tonight? We'll figure this out. He didn't call back that night. Or the next day. My daughter Emily was 28, living in Los Angeles, trying to make it as a lifestyle influencer. She had 43,000 followers on Instagram, which she reminded me about constantly. When I called her, she was at some kind of event. Mom, this isn't really a good time. I'm at a brand launch. Emily, please. I have cancer. What? Oh my God. Okay. Look, I'm sorry, but I literally can't talk right now. I'm about to go live. Can we FaceTime tomorrow? Tomorrow came and went. No FaceTime. I started chemotherapy 2 weeks before Christmas. The treatment center was 30 minutes from my house, and I drove myself to every appointment. I'd watch other patients arrive with their families, husbands holding wives' hands, daughters pushing mothers in wheelchairs, sons carrying bags and pillows. I'd sit alone in the infusion chair, IV in my arm, scrolling through social media. Emily posted photos from a ski trip in Aspen. Brian's wife tagged him at a company holiday party. Neither of them mentioned their mother was spending Christmas Eve hooked up to poison, trying not to vomit into a plastic basin. My neighbor Rosa found me on Christmas morning. I'd made it from the bathroom back to bed, but I couldn't get up. She had a key for emergencies, and when I didn't answer her knock, she let herself in. She took one look at me and called an ambulance. I spent Christmas Day in the hospital. Severe dehydration, they said. The nurses were kind, the way we always are to each other. They knew I was one of them. They also knew I was alone. I texted both my children from my hospital bed. In hospital. Dehydration from chemo. I'm okay, but it was scary. Brian responded 6 hours later. Glad you're okay. Crazy busy with year-end stuff. Emily hearted the message. Just hearted it. Didn't even type words. I stared at that little heart icon for a long time, feeling something crack open inside my chest that had nothing to do with cancer. They discharged me the day after Christmas. Rosa drove me home, helped me into bed, made me soup I couldn't eat. She sat with me for a while, this woman who I'd only known as my neighbor for 3 years, showing me more care than my own children. Your kids, she said carefully. They know how sick you are? I told them. She nodded, her lips pressed thin. My mother used to say, watch who shows up when you can't stand up. She was right every time. I spent that night thinking about everything. The cottage I was lying in, the savings account I'd built working double shifts for 30 years, the life insurance money from Tom's death that I'd barely touched, saving it for emergencies or maybe for the kids someday. I thought about Brian's private school tuition, Emily's car I'd bought her for college, the down payment I'd given Brian for his first house. $20,000 I didn't really have, but I'd given it anyway because he was my son. I fell asleep counting all the ways I'd sacrificed and woke up the next morning to the sound of a car in my driveway. I pulled myself out of bed, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and looked out the window, Brian's SUV, and behind it, Emily's white Tesla. My heart jumped. They came. They actually came. I opened the door with tears already forming, ready to hug them, to let them see how much I needed them, how scared I'd been. Brian stepped onto the porch first, not quite meeting my eyes. Emily followed, her phone already out, recording something. Neither moved to embrace me. "You look terrible," Emily said, then quickly added, "I mean, how are you feeling?" "I'm managing. I'm so glad you're both here. I know it's last minute, but actually, Mom, we need to talk to you about something," Brian interrupted. He glanced at Emily. Some unspoken communication passing between them. "Can we come in?" I stepped back, my legs unsteady. Something was wrong. This wasn't the visit I'd imagined. We sat in my small living room, me in Tom's old recliner, them on the couch. They looked around the cottage like they were appraising it, and that's when I noticed the woman standing in my doorway. Tall, blonde, expensive suit. "Mom, this is Diane Matthews. She's a real estate agent," Brian said, and my blood went cold. "Brian, what?" "Just hear us out," Emily cut in, leaning forward with that earnest expression she used in her Instagram videos. "We've been talking, and we're really worried about you. You're sick, and you're all alone in this big house. It's 2 bedrooms, and the medical bills are going to be insane." We looked it up. Stage 3 cancer treatment can cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars. You don't have that kind of money. I stared at my daughter. "I have insurance." "But insurance doesn't cover everything," Brian said, pulling out his phone. "Copays, deductibles, experimental treatments. You're going to need cash. And honestly, Mom, this house is too much for you anyway, even if you weren't sick. All these stairs, the beach access, the maintenance, there are no stairs. It's a 1-story cottage." He ignored me. Diane pulled the comps. "In this market, you're looking at $850, maybe $900,000. That would set you up for all your medical care, and you could move into a nice assisted living facility. We already found a few that—" "You want me to sell my house?" My voice came out strangled. "The house your father and I bought? Where you grew up? You want me to sell it and move into a home?" "It's not a home, Mom, it's assisted living," Emily said, like she was correcting a child. "They have nurses and activities and everything. You'd be so much safer there." I looked between them, these 2 people I'd raised, nursed through every fever and nightmare, worked overtime to buy them everything they wanted. These strangers in my living room. "When did you arrange this?" I asked quietly. Brian had the grace to look uncomfortable. "We've been discussing it for a few weeks." "A few weeks? Since I told you about the cancer." "We wanted to have a solution ready," Emily said. "We knew you'd be emotional and probably not thinking clearly, so we did the research for you." I laughed. It came out harsh and bitter. "You haven't visited me once. Not once since my diagnosis. You didn't come for Christmas. You didn't call. But you had time to research real estate values and find me an old folks' home?" "Mom, don't be dramatic," Brian said, an edge creeping into his voice. "We're trying to help you." "Where's the money going to go?" I asked. "If I sell." "The proceeds." They exchanged another look. "Well, obviously it would be for your care first," Emily said carefully. "But anything left over. I mean, eventually it would come to us anyway, right? So we were thinking it might make sense to set up some kind of joint account situation where we could help manage things for you, since you're going to be so sick." There it was, the truth, stripped bare and ugly. "You want me to sell my house and give you the money." "We want to help you," Brian said, but his voice was tight. "And yeah, we both have financial situations that this could help with. I've got 2 kids in private school, Mom. Do you know what that costs? And Emily's trying to buy a house in LA. This would benefit everyone." "I'm dying," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm dying, And you can't even wait for me to be dead before you divide up my assets? Emily's face hardened. That's not fair. We're here, aren't we? We drove all the way up here to check on you. You drove here with a real estate agent. Because we love you, Brian said, standing up. Because we're thinking about your future. But if you're going to be like this, if you're going to throw it in our faces, get out. I stood too, my blanket falling to the floor. I was shaking, from weakness or rage. I couldn't tell. Get out of my house. Mom. Get out. Diane Matthews slipped out first, smart enough to know a sinking ship. Emily grabbed her purse, tears of anger in her eyes. You're being completely unreasonable. We're trying to help you, and you're making us the bad guys. Brian stopped at the door. Think about what we said. We'll give you a few days to calm down. But Mom, you need to be realistic. You're not going to get through this alone. And that house is wasted on just you. They left. I watched their cars pull away, and then I collapsed back into the recliner and cried until I had nothing left. Rosa found me an hour later. She let herself in again, took one look at my face, and just held me while I told her everything. Those selfish children, she whispered. Your Tom would be heartbroken. Tom. God, I missed him. He'd died 8 years ago, sudden heart attack at 55. No warning, no goodbye. He'd left me the cottage, his life insurance, and a will that said simply, everything to my wife Margaret. She'll know what to do. I'd done what I thought was right. Saved for the kids, helped them start their lives, and now they wanted the rest before I was even gone. What am I going to do? I asked Rosa. She was quiet for a moment, then pulled out her phone. I'm going to call my nephew. He's a lawyer, estate planning. You need to talk to him. Rosa, I can't afford. Margaret, listen to me. You need to protect yourself. Those children of yours, they're going to come back. And next time, they might not ask nicely. The next morning, I got a call from Brian's lawyer. They were petitioning the court to have me declared mentally incompetent to manage my affairs due to my illness. I sat on my bed, staring at the legal notice that had been emailed to me, feeling like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. But Rosa's nephew, Daniel, was already on it. He arrived that afternoon, a kind-faced man in his 40s who looked at me with genuine concern. Mrs. Rivera, I need you to understand something. Your children are moving fast because they're scared you'll change your will. That tells me they think they're entitled to everything right now. Have you made any estate plans? Tom left everything to me. I just assumed. When I die, it splits between Brian and Emily. Do you want that? After what they've done? I thought about it. Really thought about it. I have 2 grandchildren. Sophie is 7, Max is 5. Brian's kids. They're sweet babies when I get to see them, which isn't often. I don't want them to suffer because their father is what he is. Daniel nodded. Then we have work to do. And Mrs. Rivera, we need to move fast. Over the next week, while I went through hell trying to fight both cancer and my children's legal assault, Daniel worked miracles. He helped me understand things I'd never thought about, strategies Tom and I should have put in place years ago. We created an irrevocable trust. That was the key word, irrevocable. Once it was done, it couldn't be undone, even if someone claimed I was incompetent later. The cottage went into the trust, along with most of my liquid assets. The beneficiaries were Sophie and Max, to receive everything in stages. College fund at 18, first home down payment at 25, full access at 30, managed by a trustee until they were 35. The trustee was David Harrison. I hadn't thought about David in 30 years. He'd been my first boyfriend, back before I met Tom, before I became Mrs. Rivera and a mother and a nurse who worked herself to exhaustion. David was the one who got away, except he didn't really get away. He moved to Oregon, became a high school teacher, retired early after his wife passed. And he'd reached out to me 6 months ago after seeing my Christmas card address from a mutual friend. We'd been emailing, carefully, cautiously, 2 old people rediscovering what might have been. When I told him about my diagnosis, he'd called immediately. When I told him what Brian and Emily had done, he'd gotten angry in a way that reminded me why I'd loved him once. "Let me help you," he'd said on the phone. "I'm coming down there." "David, you don't have to." "Margaret, I've spent 30 years wondering what happened to you. I'm not letting you go through this alone." So David became my trustee. Daniel drew up papers that were ironclad, and then we waited for the other shoe to drop. It took 3 days. Brian and Emily showed up together again, this time with Brian's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Karen, who looked like she billed by the minute. They didn't knock. Brian still had his key from years ago. I was in the kitchen with David, who'd moved into my guest room to help with my care. We were making tea when we heard the front door open. "Mom?" Emily's voice, suspicious. "Whose car is in the driveway?" They rounded the corner and stopped short at the sight of David standing next to me, protective and solid in a way that clearly bothered them. "Who the hell is this?" Brian demanded. "I'm David Harrison. You must be Margaret's children." He didn't offer his hand. "What are you doing here?" Emily asked me, ignoring David entirely. "Mom, you can't just have random men living in your house. This is exactly what we were worried about. You're vulnerable, and people are going to take advantage. David is an old friend. He's helping me." "I bet he is," Brian said darkly. "How much is he stealing from you, Mom?" David stiffened, but I put a hand on his arm. "Don't." Karen, the lawyer, stepped forward smoothly. "Mrs. Rivera, we need to discuss the competency hearing. It's scheduled for next Tuesday. I understand you've retained counsel, but I want you to know that this doesn't have to be adversarial. If you voluntarily agree to a conservatorship—" "No." "Mom, be reasonable," Emily said. "We have documented evidence of mental decline. You're making poor decisions. You're letting strange men move in. You're refusing necessary medical advice. I've refused to sell my house. That's not mental decline. That's sanity." Brian's face flushed. "You're being selfish. You're sick, you need help, and you're too stubborn to admit it. Fine. We'll let the court decide." "Actually," Daniel said, stepping into the room from where he'd been waiting in the hallway, "you won't." He handed Karen a folder. She opened it, and I watched her face change as she read. Then she looked up at Brian and Emily, and I saw something like disgust flicker across her professional mask. "Your mother executed an irrevocable trust 8 days ago. The house is no longer hers to sell. Her liquid assets have been placed in trust as well. Even if you succeed in having her declared incompetent, which you won't, there's nothing for a conservator to manage. She's protected everything." The silence in my kitchen was deafening. Emily found her voice first. "You can't do that. You're hiding assets from us." "They're not your assets," David said quietly. "They're hers. And now they're her grandchildren's." Brian's face went from red to purple. "Sophie and Max? You're giving everything to them?" "They're 7 and 5, Emily shrieked. "They don't need $1 million house." "Neither do you," I said. My voice was steady now, cold even. "They'll get it when they're grown. Education at 18, home down payment at 25, full access at 30. Managed by David, who actually cares about me, until they're 35. "This is insane," Brian said. "You're insane. We're your children." "Then where were you?" The question exploded out of me. "Where were you on Christmas when I was in the hospital? Where were you during any of my chemo appointments? Where were you when I was so sick I couldn't get out of bed? You were in Seattle. You were in Aspen. You were at parties and events and living your lives, and the only time you came to see me was when you wanted to sell my house out from under me. We have lives, Mom. We have responsibilities." "So did I. I had a responsibility to raise you, to love you, to sacrifice everything for you, and I did. I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for your braces and your sports and your colleges. I gave you everything. And you couldn't even call me." Emily was crying now, but they were angry tears. "You're our mother. You're supposed to give us things. That's what mothers do." Something in me broke at those words. Not with pain anymore, but with clarity. "Get out," I said. "All of you. I never want to see you again." "Mom, I mean it, Brian. You're not my son anymore." "Not really. A son shows up. A son cares. You're just a stranger who wants my money." Karen gathered her papers quickly. "We'll be challenging the trust in court. This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Daniel said. "The trust was executed while Mrs. Rivera was demonstrably competent, witnessed by 3 people, including a doctor. You have no grounds. And if you do challenge it, I'll counter-sue for elder financial abuse. I have documentation of everything. The pressure to sell. The competency claim filed within days of her cancer diagnosis. The pattern of exploitation. Do you really want that in the public record?" They left. Brian and Emily both, without another word to me. I watched them go, and this time I didn't cry. I just felt empty. David made me sit down. Made me drink tea. Rosa came over, and she held my hand while I told her everything. "You did the right thing," she said firmly. "Those children made their choice. Now they have to live with it." The competency hearing never happened. Karen withdrew the petition 3 days later. I heard through Daniel that Brian and Emily had decided to cut their losses, though Emily left me a vicious voicemail about how I'd destroyed our family and she'd never forgive me. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. What I didn't expect was the letter that came 2 weeks later. It was from Brian's wife, Jennifer. I'd always liked Jennifer, though we weren't close. She wrote that she hadn't known what Brian was planning until after they'd already gone to see me. She'd been horrified. They were separated now, she wrote, because she couldn't stay married to someone who would treat his dying mother that way. She wanted to bring Sophie and Max to see me, if I'd allow it. I called her immediately. She cried. I cried. And the next Saturday, my grandchildren came to visit. They were so big now, so changed from the last time I'd seen them at Brian's house 18 months ago. Sophie held my hand carefully, like I was made of glass. Max climbed into my lap and asked why I didn't have hair anymore. "I'm sick, sweetie," I told him. "The medicine makes my hair fall out." "Like Grandpa Tom?" Sophie asked quietly. "He got sick too. A little bit like that. Is it going to make you die?" I looked at Jennifer, who nodded slightly. We'd agreed on honesty. "Maybe," I said. "The doctors are doing everything they can, but sometimes people die even when we don't want them to." Max looked up at me with his father's eyes, but with none of Brian's hardness. "If you die, who's going to love us like you do?" My heart shattered and reformed in that moment. Your mom loves you like that. And you know what? I made sure that even if I'm not here, I can still take care of you. There's going to be money for you to go to college and to buy your first house someday. Because that's what grandmas do. We love you even when we're gone. They stayed for 3 hours. We walked on the beach carefully, with me leaning on David's arm. We made cookies that were slightly burned. We watched the sunset from my porch. And when Jennifer buckled them into her car to leave, Sophie hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, baby. So, so much." Jennifer promised to bring them every weekend. She kept that promise. The chemo continued. Some days were better than others. David was there for all of it, the good and the terrible. He drove me to appointments, held my hand during infusions, cleaned me up when I was too sick to care for myself. Rosa brought food and sat with me on hard days. Daniel checked in weekly to make sure the trust was secure and that Brian and Emily hadn't tried anything new. They hadn't. I'd heard through Jennifer that they'd both written me off entirely. Emily had posted something vague on Instagram about toxic family members and cutting them out for your mental health. Brian had apparently told people I'd gone senile and cut him out of the will for no reason. I didn't care. I was too busy living. Because here's what happened in those months of treatment. I found out what it meant to be loved properly. David made me laugh when I wanted to die. Rosa taught me to knit, something to do with my hands during infusions. Jennifer sent me photos of the kids every single day. My old nursing colleagues came to visit, bringing gossip and love. Doctor. Morrison adjusted my treatment when I couldn't tolerate it, fought with insurance companies on my behalf, held my hand while giving me difficult news. I had a community, a chosen family, people who showed up. 6 months into treatment, I got news I'd stopped hoping for. The tumor was shrinking. Not gone, but smaller. Dr. Morrison was cautiously optimistic. "You're responding well, Margaret. I want to try a different protocol. A newer one. It's aggressive, but I think you can handle it." I could. I did. 8 months after my children tried to take my home, I stood on my porch at sunset with David beside me. I was thin, still bald, tired in my bones, but I was alive, and I was surrounded by people who actually loved me. "Thank you," I said to David, "for everything, for coming here, for staying." He took my hand. "Margaret, I've loved you since we were 17 years old. I never stopped. I just lost you for a while. I'm not making that mistake again." He kissed me then, soft and careful, like I was precious. And for the first time in 8 years, since Tom died, I felt like I might be. My phone rang. "Jennifer? Maggie? I hope this is okay, but I told Sophie and Max they could call you. They wanted to say goodnight." More than okay. 2 little voices on speakerphone. "Good night, Grandma. We love you." "I love you too, babies. Sweet dreams." After I hung up, David wrapped his arm around my shoulders, and we watched the sun sink into the Pacific. The waves crashed against the rocks, the same as they had the day I got my diagnosis, the same as they had when I sent my children away. But I was different now. I'd learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you clears away everything that was slowly poisoning you. I'd learned that family isn't always blood. I'd learned that love is action, not words. Show up or shut up, as Rosa liked to say. I'd learned that I could survive losing my children, my hair, my strength, my certainty. And I'd learned that, sometimes, on the other side of loss, there's something better waiting. I was dying, maybe faster than some people, slower than others, but I wasn't dead, not yet, and I was going to spend whatever time I had left with people who loved me back. My children thought they were taking something from me when they showed up with that realtor. What they actually did was set me free. I stood on that porch at 68 years old, bald and thin and sick, with a man who loved me and a sunset painting the sky pink and gold, and I thought, this is what peace feels like. This is what winning looks like. Not revenge, not punishment. Just the simple act of choosing myself, choosing people who choose me back, choosing to protect what matters instead of giving it away to people who only see its dollar value. Brian and Emily would inherit $1 each when I died. The lawyer papers said so explicitly, not to be cruel, but to make it clear it was intentional, that I hadn't forgotten them. I'd simply decided they'd already taken enough. Everything else would go to Sophie and Max, when they were old enough to understand that love means more than money, that showing up matters, that you can't put a price on holding someone's hand when they're scared. I hoped they'd understand. I thought they would. Jennifer would make sure of it. The sun disappeared into the ocean, and the stars started coming out. David squeezed my hand. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That I'm glad I didn't die before I learned what really matters." "What's that?" "This," I said, gesturing at the cottage, the ocean, the sky, the people who stay, the ones who show up. "That's all that matters in the end." He nodded. We stood there in the gathering dark, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt grateful, not for the cancer, never for that, but for what it had revealed, for the clarity it had forced, for the way it had stripped everything down to what was real and true and worth holding on to. My children would never understand. They'd tell the story differently, make me the villain, paint themselves as victims of a crazy old woman. I knew that. I'd made my peace with it. Because at the end of the day, I knew the truth. And the people who mattered knew it too. I was dying, but I was finally, truly, living. And that, I thought as David led me back inside where it was warm, where Rosa had left fresh soup and Jennifer had texted more photos of the kids, where my chosen family waited to wrap me in love I'd earned by being brave enough to demand it. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.